Hey there, it's Andrea, and welcome to the Voice of Influence podcast. Today, I have with me Dana Campbell. She is a transformative executive coach and strategic consultant who helps leadership teams navigate complexity, scale sustainability, and thrive through turbulence. With 20 plus years of experience, including Fortune 500 consulting, Dana blends sharp business strategy with deep insight into team dynamics to unlock breakthrough performance. Welcome to the Voice of Influence podcast, Dana.
Hi, Andrea. So great to be with you.
And the other piece of this is that I've known Dana for how long? 8 years, 9 years?
Yeah, something like that.
We were in a
Probably,
program together.
yeah, maybe 7 years, maybe 2019,
Yeah, something like that.
18, something in there. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. And it's been fun to see you grow, to see you even your family grow in that amount of time.
Yeah, life has shifted a lot for both of us in that time.
Yeah. And can you start us out by just kind of what's the like big picture? What do you do? I mean, obviously coaching, consulting, like how do you describe what you do?
We really help executive teams click. So, anytime you get a group of people together, there is dysfunction. There is a level of 20 people running in different directions instead of all rowing in the same direction. We help leaders get their teams to click so that the team is rowing in the same direction and they can make big things happen.
That's a great way to put it. I love that. I want to come back to that piece of it, but first go back a little ways into like early Dana years, which I don't know anything about really. So I'm wondering, was there a point in your life when you remember realizing that you could really make things happen? Like you could have influence, you could help shape the future. Do you remember?
So, I have a little bit of a unique story in that I knew I wanted to be a management consultant when I was in high school. Just a
Really?
weird thing. My mom worked in the tech sector and kind of came home and started telling me about this. And the more I heard about getting to go and be in different projects all the time and like influencing what was happening in companies, I was really, really interested in it. And I think the most immediate example that's standing out for sure is my very first consulting project. I was actually on the tech side, developing code and developing large ERP systems. And it turned out I was one of four people in the country who knew a tech platform. And so they flew me to the headquarters of this technology company to meet with the developer who was building the technology, so that I
Wow.
could influence how things were happening. I was 22 years
I
old.
was just going to ask. Oh
Yeah.
my goodness, that's wild.
So I think that there was this real moment of like, oh, if you really throw yourself into stuff and get to know things and get to understand how they work, you can have a really big voice in them. And I've had multiple moments kind of like that throughout my career.
How do you think that continued to shape your career path?
I think that it put me in places and rooms where I wouldn't necessarily have always been. I ran a project when I was at Ann Taylor. I was a manager at the time, so like kind of very middle of the road. And I ended up in a weekly meeting with two EVPs and the CEO because it was a mission critical project, but I was the one who had the voice of the field. And so I think it put me in rooms that I wasn't necessarily always going to be in.
Yeah.
I also think it put a radar on me, or maybe I have a radar for like, oh, something isn't right about this, and we can't just sit quietly. We have to do something about it.
Okay. So that piece of it right there, we have to do something about it, I think is where there can be a divide sometimes. Like some people see that and say, we have to do something about it. Some people see that and say, it is what it is. Do you notice that?
Much harder for me to say it is what it is. It is much harder for me to say that's okay. Let's just sit with it. There are definitely points where you have to get to that of like, okay, we've put enough into this and something isn't changing, or I've maxed out my influence or whatever it is. Um, but that is not my natural place to go.
So it was built into you a long time ago. Like it was probably part of your DNA.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you noticed that you have helped other people to like that to spark in them, or maybe they didn't have that, or they maybe felt like they needed to hold back, and then by you being you, it actually sparked them to do it?
I think that that's one of my superpowers as a coach, actually. So I'm an Enneagram 7. I don't know how much you know about the Enneagram.
A little bit.
I'm what's called an enthusiastic visionary. And the Enneagram is very much about what are you avoiding, actually? Like what's the thing you're avoiding? Well, Enneagram 7s avoid pain. So it is what it is like painful. And that's why I'm not so great about sitting there. And I think as a coach, I some of the feedback I hear most often from my clients is how much confidence they gained, either to be themselves or to go out and make a huge change happen, that they didn't have before. And so I do think that there's something through the alchemy of our relationship and our partnership that helps them go out and do things that are big and powerful.
Mm-hmm. I can totally see that. I can see
Yeah.
that in you. Yeah. Do you think that there's, I don't know, what do you think you do? Like something in the alchemy of our relationship is really vague, but like, do you think that there's anything that you actually do?
Um, so I have two examples standing out in my head. Do you want examples or do you want something?
Sure.
So I have two examples that stand out in my head, and um, this isn't maybe specific. I think it's about that I have very strong energy that can hold a lot. So my first example, I used to teach yoga in New York City, and I taught this early morning before work class. And of course, midway through class every day, they would start construction. And one morning, there was a fire that started. And I had this very regular student come up to me a few weeks later and say, "Hey, I really want to talk to you about that day." Turns out he had been in the building across from one of the towers that had been hit in 9/11. So his fight or flight got really activated. And he was like, "I just want you to know the way you treated that situation kept me in class and let me work through this like very deep trauma that he had. And I think it's because I just held it as like we keep moving on." The other example, I led a retreat for a group of CEOs in the nonprofit healthcare space. And midway through the retreat, two of the CEOs got in a screaming match with each other. I mean, I'm talking like screaming about, "You sued me and you did this and you did this." And I, did what I thought anybody would do to diffuse it, get it to a place where we could be productive, where we could sit down and have the conversation. And another participant in the room walked up to me and said, "Well, if you can handle that, you can handle my team. Why don't you come work with my team?" So I think that there's something in the like holding a lot of intensity that comes pretty naturally to me. I don't really shy away from intensity at all. I get really curious about it and pull it away, pull through it, that maybe helps people move through it.
Yeah.
Kind of
And
go
just
after
your
stuff.
own sense of calm. When things get a little crazy, do you get like dialed in? Do you become even more focused?
Um, I think as long as I don't see it as personal.
Oh, sure.
If it feels personal, no.
Then we all
Uh,
get crazy.
Yeah, I think, look, as I mentioned, I taught yoga for a long time. Mindfulness practices, embodied practices are a big thing for me as a way for handling intensity. I've also been the person who rode the roller coaster every 5 seconds. And so I've kind of worked my way out of that. So I do think, I mean, fight or flight in definition, you do get dialed in, but I do think that there is this focusing in on what's really happening here, what's really the resistance here, or what's really the conflict here, that makes it easier for me to question and pull through and look around. And that doesn't mean I'm always successful, but
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. I'm always kind of curious what other people's experience is, because when chaos, like when something really, really, I don't know, I guess like an emergency or something comes up, like you had mentioned with the situation with yoga, um, I tend to go into a very focused, I see it all. I see the strategy, I see the picture, I see who needs what, where, when, and I just go. And it's like I don't know. I feel very dialed in. So I'm always kind of curious when somebody is kind of like that, if you have a similar experience and why, why that is partly.
Uh,
I don't know.
I think there's a lot of mom energy in that,
Hmm,
of being able to
it could
see
be.
chaos and figure out all the things that have to get solved somehow in the meantime. Of course, haven't been a mom that long. I think that there's a lot of training. I mean, I don't think that's how I was in my 20s. And I think it took a really big toll and I burned out because I was buying into too much of the drama. I also think being on the outside of an organization makes it much easier
Oh,
to be in
yeah.
a position where you can be dialed in. And I think that that's the benefit of having outsiders work with you, their clarity, because they aren't in the weeds, because they aren't in the drama, they aren't in all of the politics.
And to your point, it's not as personal.
It's not personal. Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah. Well, and I was picturing you in that environment where the two people were yelling at each other, two executives were yelling at each other. And yes, that says something about you and how you handle that. But I also wonder how that impacts everybody else in the room and their thoughts on their ability to stand up to what they need to stand up to. And
Hmm.
yeah.
I mean, for sure in that situation, right? I'm very sensitive to what's happening for everybody else in the room. And is this productive for everybody or is this something that needs to whatever? And in that instance, it was not productive for everybody. So we had to get everybody out of there. Because I am very into embodied practice and stuff. This was quite a few years ago, but I can for sure tell you, I immediately got people standing up. I moved the group, like we were in a whole group thing. I'm sure I sent them into smaller group breakouts or something for right, diffuse it, get them in their bodies, change the energy
That's
so
great.
that you can bring it back. But I never asked the question that you just asked around like, okay, what's happening for each of you now? Which would be an interesting question to ask.
It's hard to remember to ask things like that. Those, I think it's also gutsy to ask something like that.
Mhm. And I think you also have to be it for me, everything always comes back to what's the objective.
Mm,
Um, and when like the head of a group like that hires to bring me in to do something, I really try to hold to that objective. So you also have to be clear if you're asking those questions and opening that dialogue, does it take you away from whatever you were there to do?
hmm. Well, and I guess let's just tie this to, a leader who is leading their own team,
Mhm.
and you're not the outside person. Something crazy happens. What kind of practices do you suggest people do to get in their bodies and out of their heads or out of reactive mode in order to be able to lead the way they need to lead?
Mhm. I think there are a couple things. If it happens in a group setting, naming it is great. Bringing humor in is great if possible. Um, Also, just literally inviting everybody to stand up, stretch their arms over their head, and then sit back down. I mean, just change your physical posture. It's amazing how much gets stored if we're not moving. Um, I think but at a more like at a deeper level, is the naming it, the question that you brought up about, okay, what's going on for everybody else, or just the regrounding everybody in, okay, that may be going on, but we're here to deal with X or we're here to deal with Y. One other thing, I think that it's important that if you aren't going to address it then, you let everybody know when you're going to address it.
Ooh, that's good. That's so
And
important.
that does a lot for people's nervous systems.
So true. An open loop is disconcerting, especially when it has to do with something that is uncertain or could rock your world somehow.
Mhm.
Hmm. Do you think that there was something at some point when you were in the early career and you were making waves and all this, and then you started to realize that and I know you said you wanted to be a consultant, but was there anything that kind of said to you, actually, I don't just want to be a consultant. I really want to focus on helping leaders navigate this complexity and build resilience. Like when did that become more of a thing?
I knew that I wanted to focus on leadership pretty early on because leaders have the biggest impact over how it feels to go home at the end of your day, right? That you have a great leader you're working for that's inspiring you, pushing you, challenge you, supporting you, all those things. Your end of day feels very different than the bad boss situation. So I knew that that was important. The resilience didn't come into play until later after I experienced burnout. So I was
Mm.
still in big consulting, uh, burnt out pretty badly. I didn't walk for 4 months.
Wow.
And when I kind of got out of it, got back into work and all that, I started noticing my colleagues having very similar experiences. I had a very healthy 28-year-old friend who developed a heart condition, another friend who developed cancer, like all of these stress-induced situations. And this was really before resilience was getting talked about. In fact, when I first became a coach, I called myself a burnout coach, and people didn't understand what that meant at the time, which is ironic. Now it's all over the place. But I think that piece of stress is going to happen. We can't necessarily stop the stress. These are intense environments anyway. How are you built up in a way to be able to not just survive it or withstand it, but to actually thrive in it is a very important distinction.
Mm.
And it requires a lot of diligence. The leaders I work with now are dealing with very stressful situations, very, mergers, team reorgs, budget cuts, all these things that are always changing, very stressful that they have to navigate through. And they have to have that resilience in them, but they also have to build it in their teams.
Right. Right. I think that's a really important point because I don't know what you're hearing in the situations that you're involved with. Are you hearing people talk about the younger generation not having the same level of resilience and all this? You smile.
I have this one startup I'm working with right now. I work with the CEO and the CIO, and it's a very young organization. And many of the issues that they both bring to me for us to work through are so much not even about age, but about maturity
Mm-hmm.
and about them having to instill in a level of like what's normal in the workplace. It's normal for people to quit their job and go to a different organization. It's normal for some of these changes to happen. It's normal for the organization to mature and the expectation on you as an employee to shift and change and evolve. So there is definitely a lot about, I see it more as a maturity issue than an age issue.
Sure. Yeah.
And so we definitely talk about that a lot. And there's another organization that I've been working with also for a year plus, and it isn't age. These people are in their 30s and maybe 40s. But it is an experience. Most of them have been at the same company for their whole career. So they haven't experienced something different before to understand, oh, this is always done everywhere. Uh, so it's a little bit less about age, and I think it's much more about worldliness and experience, and that kind of like time under pressure than
Mm-hmm.
it is how many years you have under your belt.
Sure. Yeah. Um, the part of your bio that I didn't read said that you have been called compassionately blunt. So I'm curious how that came about. How does this play into how you work with folks?
So I was not born in New York, but I've been here 20 years, and I think I have a lot of New Yorker energy. I can't handle needing to beat around the bush to get to something. It takes a lot of energy for me to do that. It's much easier for me
I have to
to
say that's
just
one
be.
of the things I just love about you. Go on.
Um, I think what I tell my clients is you're gonna get it straight, but you're gonna know it's coming from a good place. Uh, that intention behind it is so much about, are we holding up the right mirror for you to get where you want to go, right? My clients, whether individual or teams, have told me where they want to go. They've designed something that they want to be in, and for whatever reason, they're not there yet. So my job is to get them there faster. My job is to help them, whatever, bridge the gap between where they are and where they want to be. And sometimes that requires I hate tough love, but compassionate bluntness. So I think that again, part of that is like innate in me. I'm impatient when it takes too many words for people to say something. I'm impatient when you can't really read through the lines. I don't like that level of unclarity. So I guess I refuse to play that game.
Have you ever had the experience where your compassionate bluntness ended up not feeling compassionate to the other person? And I guess my question really comes down to how do you make sure the compassion part comes out? Because I think that people who are blunt and who can be blunt sometimes don't know how to weave the compassion part in. So I'm just wondering how you do it.
I don't know if there's a method to it. Certainly, it's hard to do that if you haven't built a relationship yet.
Yeah.
If you haven't built some level of trust and respect, it's very hard to say some of those things. And I think there are certainly situations where I've shied away from my compassionate bluntness because that level of trust was not there yet, or I knew the person would not be able to hear it or respond to it. So I think I'm very sensitive to where do I think a person is in any given moment. I often will also ask for permission if I'm not
Mm.
quite sure how is this going to be received. I have some clients. I have a client I've been working with for 9 years. I know exactly how he's going to receive what I'm going to say when it's like the blunt part. But newer clients, I think I give some of that time to weave in. I ask for a lot of permission. I test the ground first, not as a way of avoiding, but of kind of testing and making sure there's receptivity. Because if there isn't receptivity, that's the problem with bluntness, right? If you're just flat out blunt, there's not necessarily receptivity. You're not going to get anywhere. And
Mm.
again, my job is to help people get somewhere.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
I'm sure I've pissed people off along the way. I know I've said things that haven't landed well, but I try very hard to be reading where they're at, understanding what type of relationship we built out, and then giving people space when you do say something really blunt to process it.
Mm. I suppose you've coached people who are also blunt and can and needed to understand this about themselves. How does that how do you help them with this?
Yeah. So I have one right now that almost everything uh he wants to say to the team you could just see so many people getting offended by, or unfortunately shutting down when they hear it and not keeping in the lines of open communication. So I go through a couple of different ways with him. One, I try to angle him into a different seat of like, okay, well, let's see how else that could be taken. What other result do you think that might create if you say it that way, et cetera? Like really kind of coming at some of the different angles on it. um, Sometimes that works, doesn't always work. Uh, I if it doesn't work, I will often call out, okay, I might have a problem with this. Let's see how I could see this getting played out, right? If he's not kind of getting to some of the red flags in it that I'm seeing. I think that the other piece, especially for leaders to understand, so even though not everybody was raised in like top-down cultures or grew up in top-down cultures, I do often think that leaders can take a, well, I'm the boss, so they need to do it my way approach and not really be looking at, hey, it takes two to do this dance. So if you want them to do it your way, you kind of have to come at this a different way to get them their participation. So there's a lot of modeling what that might look like in a way that can tap into motivation. I mentioned the Enneagram already. I use the Enneagram a lot with my clients because it looks through that lens of motivation and how you tap into somebody else's motivation. So one of my clients just did a very large reorg. As they were planning the reorg, we went through each of their team members' Enneagram profiles and looked from their motivation to say, what do you have to say to this person to get them on board? What do you have to say to this person to get them on board? Not to manipulate, but
Mm.
to understand where they come from, the lens they see things through.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so I think both all of that, what I just said, is kind of how I deal with blunt leaders and help them to kind of be in a place where they can bring the compassion in.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I would think that that would be more prevalent, I guess, the higher up you go in an organization?
I think it really depends. I I also see a school of leaders who feel like they've had to train the bluntness out of themselves.
Oh, yeah.
So instead of being able to be blunt and having this added compassion or whatever other element you think should go along with it, where they feel like they've had to hold back because of whatever historical feedback they received and stuff like that. Um, and so there's also a sometimes having to, in fact, I was on with a client yesterday. I'm like, well, where is your authority in this? You're literally leading the team. Why aren't you telling the team what you want? Um, and so I think that it can come from both ends, where you have this group of leaders who have leaned into their bluntness. It has worked for them and they can be direct and whatever, and they've somehow never gotten their wrist slapped for it. And you have leaders who've somehow gotten their wrist slapped for it and have to be kind of pushed back into it.
Good point. Okay, so we've had conversations about AI and the way that things are changing, future of work. And I'm wondering, from your perspective at this point, what are some of the key things that leaders really need to lean into, or the skills that they need to cultivate just as they're looking forward in the next 6 months to 5 years? We don't really know, but let's just say the next 6 months, because honestly, we don't know what's going to come after that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I guess I'm sort of sitting in the camp of the people who are going to be the most successful are the ones who understand how to use AI. And those will be the people who like know how to partner with it, et cetera. So I think right now, leaders who want to maintain their teams, keep growing, et cetera, need to be spending a lot of time themselves and coaching their teams in the mental modeling that is needed in order to partner with AI to be better at their jobs, to accelerate the pace, to cut out all of the fluff that isn't needed, all of that. I think that's an enormous piece. And actually, ironically, I had a call maybe 5 years ago with somebody at a big consulting firm where they said, we are worried about critical thinking. We think critical thinking is like going away. I actually think now more than ever, critical thinking is the skill people have to develop because one, you don't know if what AI is telling you is accurate, right? There's all sorts of
Yeah.
inaccuracies and falsehoods that come out of there. Two, I think that we are moving into a new way of thinking about working. And so that ability to have judgment and critical thinking and assess things and be asking really potent questions that nobody else is asking, I think is where a lot of success comes. And then the third part, and this isn't new because this has been for a long time, but I do think ability to deal with emotions and ability to understand emotions, motivation, getting the best out of people, I think is absolutely critical now.
Mm. You mentioned mental modeling. Can you give us a little bit more of a description of what you're talking about when that comes to AI?
Yeah. So if I take like a basic copywriter's job, super, super basic, right? On how they've always done their job. Well, now you have all these tools that are doing it instead, or can give you the heavy lift to do some of the copywriting, et cetera. So to me, it goes beyond, okay, well, what's the next critical question that actually has to get asked? Where now that you aren't using your time here, what are the bigger, deeper questions that you can? And I think it's routing your brain into the more complex problems or more complex questions as a way of orienting in your work.
It's so fascinating. I mean, it does seem to me, and I've been thinking about this too, the need to kind of just up level the way that we think and what we're thinking about. And I think for me, I'm still exploring what that means and understanding what that means. So it's interesting to hear your perspective on that. And if people wanted to grow in that in particular, what do you see as how we get humanity, but definitely people at work, to that next level thinking?
I don't think it happens in isolation. So I don't think it's something you just task an individual to go up level your thinking. I actually think it has to happen through a lot of dialogue and through a lot of challenge. Um,
Okay, I love that. I think the challenge piece of it, I think we have to make sure that we're embracing.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, keep going.
Yeah, I think there are bigger problems that all of us can solve now. I don't know if it's where I am in my life or the people I'm surrounded by now, but I feel like everybody just has bigger challenges on their plate, personally, professionally, certainly globally. There are bigger problems for us to solve, things that are coming down the pike. And I think whereas before it was very easy to stay sort of in your job description and just focus on like I have this discrete thing, we kind of now have to become obsessed with solving problems. And I think that that kind of only happens. Leaders have to definitely encourage and foster and culture that, but people who aren't leaders can foster and
Yes.
cultivate well.
Yes. Yes. Problem solving.
I had a leader yesterday tell me that one, the thing that would make his life the easiest is if his team started answering questions he didn't even know he needed to be asking yet. And two, that he wants his team obsessed with solving the problems they're solving. And that if they aren't obsessed with solving those problems, then maybe they aren't the right fit in the organization.
Wow. Yeah. And then what about how that works with, I mean, are we seeing that in isolation, or are we seeing the problem solving as collaborative? And what does that mean? That's something I've definitely been thinking about a lot too.
So what have you been thinking about with that?
How important it is to build on each other's ideas and um, not just work in tandem, but yeah, build together, tear down together, you know, not be afraid or intimidated by each other and the fact that somebody else has a different opinion or somebody else has a different way of looking at this, that it doesn't have to be personal when
Yeah.
we go into those kinds of problem solving examples.
I mean, look, I think that there is a lot of this that ego in the workplace has to be reimagined a bit. Because I do think the power of teams now is in the 1+1 = 3, not in 1+1 = 2
Yep.
piece. So that's really what you're looking to extract out. So I do think there's a time and place for togetherness, and there's a time and place for alone, individual
Sure.
dedicated work. And I think an enormous piece that comes into play with that is ego and how we view our importance, our influence, our safety at work.
The point that you just made about like there's time for that aloneness and time for togetherness. I mean, I think that we do better at being 1+1 = 3. We do better at synergy when we have that alone time as well, that is productive, not just productive, but like nurturing too and nourishing. And yeah, we have a sense of who we are as an individual too.
Yeah, I think that alone time is critical. I also think together time is critical. I was talking to somebody yesterday whose company is fully remote, and they were expressing how, once a month or once a quarter or something like that, they go into the office and it's like a shot of adrenaline to them because it's so much energy to bring back in and it's so helpful. So I think the balance between those is really important.
Yeah. So I have some wrap up kind of questions, but I'm wondering if there's anything else that you're like, you know what, I really just wish people understood this about where we are right now, about what leadership
Yeah.
means, whatever.
Yeah. So I, in 2020, created a model for leading through turbulent times that I walked a couple clients through and then did nothing with as we were talking about dealing with the mass chaos in 2020. And it feels very much like we're back in a similar spot of the mass chaos of 2020. Um, and what I think leaders often miss is that things need to be communicated, and then you give the clear assignment, and the team is supposed to go and do whatever. And I think the nuance between this, and even old change management models would have told you that communicate, train, do follow-up support, and voila, everybody should be doing something different. I think with the mass influx of change and just that it's always constant and there's always so much pressure on everybody in every position, what leaders really need to understand is first how much they need to normalize or help people on their team understand that they're not alone in feeling overwhelmed, in this feeling crazy, in feeling destabilized. Use any word you want there. So, first, always with leaders now, I go to like, how do you help normalize this for your team? Change is hard, or this thing you're being asked to adapt to is challenging, or there is a lot of overwhelm, or there is instability. So, normalize. Then I think you have to really anchor people. I don't think leaders spend enough time anchoring people, right? We spend all this time at the end of the year creating a strategic plan. And then so many leaders I've talked to are like, by March, the strategic plan is like, nobody's talking about it. Um, and it's not, anchoring is not only a strategic plan, but like, what are people really aiming for? What's the goal in this? Are people constantly really clear exactly what you're looking for, exactly what you're expecting, or what they're all aiming for? So you normalize, you anchor. And then I think the last thing is inspire. And I didn't use the word motivate on purpose. I think you're really looking for points of challenge or points of excitement or other things that you can inspire people to keep going. Because there is a lot, most likely people's work is not their passion, right? I don't know the numbers, but very few people have work as their pure passion project. So you are constantly having to look at, okay, I'm taking people who are good at doing something, but they'd probably rather be on vacation. They'd probably rather, go read a book or go for a bike ride. So how am I really getting the most out of them and keeping them interested and excited? And I think that that balance of those three things is something leaders have to always be thinking about in this moment.
That's really good. Dana, when you've had mentors in the past who have really impacted you, what is something that they did that you've really integrated into the way that you not necessarily coach, but mentor or you think of mentoring?
I think my very first manager was probably the most mentor like that I had. Um, and I think he took a very individualized approach to the people that he managed. I think he was very transparent, um, and instilled a lot of trust. His motto was very much that his job was to pass on as much responsibility as he could so that people could get promoted, so that he could get promoted. So it was never a like, oh, I have to keep you down here. If I work your way up, there's nowhere for me to go but up. And I think that is, I don't love that phrase, a rising tide lifts all boats, but I do think there is a lot of that energy in of like, if other people are being successful, then it only speaks volumes of where I can go. And so I do try to put a lot of that energy into how do you support others.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, so I'm going to ask you, first of all, how can people find you and connect with you?
They can find me on LinkedIn, Dana Campbell, or our website is optimizecore.com. And that's how they could connect with me.
And we'll put it in the show notes so it's easy to find. Last question. If you could offer one challenge to somebody who wants to help shape the future, what would it be?
Go do something that scares you. Pick the thing that feels maybe not all the way scary, but a little bit like you might throw up that feels that big and tackle that thing.
I love that. Thank you so much for taking time to do this today. This has been super fun.
Very good. I'm glad to have spent time with you.
Me too.